Hey, everybody. Welcome to episode 10 of the Parallel Physiques podcast. This week, we have a great conversation, Coach Kenneth and I, about ways to cultivate self-awareness or connection to self. This was a great conversation. Hopefully, you get a lot out of it. We went really in depth with 6 different ways that you can connect to yourself in order to help you move forward in your health journey or whatever journey you happen to be on. Even giving examples from our own lives about how these things have helped us and why it's so important to be able to cultivate that self-awareness. It's really the only way we can make progress moving forward. So, welcome to episode 10. Super excited for you all to hear this. Let us know your thoughts and check out the show notes. We will get right into the podcast.
5, 4, 3, 2, are you ready?
Hey, everybody. Welcome to episode 10 of the Parallel Physiques podcast. I am Coach Laura, one of your hosts for today. Kenneth is laughing.
It was like jazz hands.
Jazz hands. Oh, remember Willie?
For the people that, yes.
Oh my God, that was the best.
For
Anyway,
the people listening and not watching, when Laura said episode 10, she threw up both hands and it just made me laugh because it looked like she was doing jazz hands.
Jazz hands.
Yeah.
Just Jack. Anyway, that is great. I love it. I watch episodes of that on like not Netflix. Netflix, yeah, sometimes on Netflix, I guess. Anyway, and Coach Kenneth is here today, of course, and we are gonna address the subject of self-awareness. And we're going to talk about it in terms of connecting to self, right? Because self-awareness is all about knowing ourselves better. And we're actually going to give you 6, and I'm using my hands a lot today if you can't. Those of you who are not watching this on YouTube, go to YouTube. It'll be a fun day. God knows what's going to happen with my hands today. But we're going to give you 6 ways that you can cultivate more connection with yourself in order to build self-awareness. Kenneth has been doing a ton of work on this with himself. This is something that I try to work on a lot. And we were talking before we jumped on here that if you're looking at coaching, if you're looking at getting a coach, or if you are a coach, right? This is one of those key components to being successful in your transformation or your health journey, whatever reason you are getting together with a coach, no matter what kind of coach it is, right? Is you need the part of that journey, part of that process is becoming more self-aware, because you're not going to change and you're not going to become a better version of yourself if you can't find that self-awareness.
Yeah, and I think too, it's just like when you take a survey across sort of everybody that you know, or even people that you don't know, there's just a lack of self-awareness in our society. And I think it has a lot to do with when you become self-aware, you realize like you have fucked up parts of you that you need to work on, and nobody really wants to work on stuff. So it's an easy thing to move through life and not have to address things if you're not self-aware. So, but yeah, do you want to talk about, are you going to like label the stuff, or do you want to kind of dive into what?
No, you know what? I think it's always more interesting, right? Like we can give you all the 6 things and do that and whatever. Let's hear the story first, right? So I think the reason that we came up with this and we were like, this is really important to talk about is because of the things that you've come to understand this week, right? Because when we talk about self-awareness with people or connection to self, people are like, okay, so I don't know, like, what are you talking about? I don't know how to do that. I don't know what that looks like. What are you even talking about? And I think you have such a great example from your week of like this huge revelation that occurred for you. And it wasn't like, we talk about revelation like, oh, it came down from the heavens and like revelation. No, this is actual work that your brain has been doing that all of a sudden comes to the forefront for you.
Yeah. So for the people that are listening that don't know me, I I've been in counseling on and off for 10 years. um, I consider myself a pretty self-aware person. So much so that I stopped going to counseling for like 2 years, and I thought, man, I got this thing nailed. I'm good. Next thing I know, life experiences hit. Don't have it. Time to go back to counseling. Go back to counseling, and it's been this journey of figuring out sort of traumatic events that have happened in my life that have turned into patterns that happen in my personal life that turn into uh, just difficult. It's a difficulty to like manage my emotions or whatever it is. Right? There's all kinds of different things that kind of pile up when you when you haven't really dealt with some stuff. So anyway, started diving in with my counselor. Had a event happen a week ago. I had some loss happen, and it really got me introspective because I had such a negative feeling that happened after this particular event happened. It was I was just sort of devastated. So as I went into counseling, um, I wanted to kind of dive into that a little bit. And as I'm talking, the things that I realized is like I have really high expectations for people. And I have those really high expectations because I have really high expectations for myself. And when people don't meet my expectations that are almost impossible to meet because I can barely meet my own expectations,
Mm.
then I get hurt. I don't get disappointed necessarily. I don't think that's the word, but I get hurt because I see someone's potential in them and they don't even want to achieve that potential. And that's a hard thing to process for me because I'm always working on myself and I'm trying to meet my potential. And that's a whole ball of wax. That's my own problem. But so we're talking about this, my counselor and I actually asked her if she'd be on the podcast and she said no.
Oh, really? Oh.
When she said no, she's like, I don't think that would be good from a client therapist
Oh.
relationship standpoint thing, like HIPAA thing maybe. But I told her I was like, you really have some great insight. And honestly, she didn't say much this week, which like some good therapists, that's what they just don't speak. They let you come to it on your own.
Mm.
So I started thinking about this thought of like my projection of um, my own expectations on other people. And I do that with my clients. I do that with some of my friends. I don't typically do that with the people closest to me. And I don't necessarily always communicate to my clients that that is what's happening. And ultimately, what what came about was when I have these high expectations and people don't meet them, I always get let down to the point to where it dysregulates me emotionally. And when I get dysregulated emotionally, then I make rash decisions or I get down and out and I can't function or I can't take care of myself. And really ultimately that's like a boundary thing too, potentially. But the driving force behind all of it, right before I walked into counseling, I was on social media for a minute and there was this article about Michael Jordan and LeBron James. And I hope everyone knows who these individuals are. If you don't, please look it up.
Google it.
They're NBA basketball players, and the article was literally like, "Who's the best basketball player that's ever lived?" LeBron James, who's currently in the league, and then Michael Jordan, who was in the league until the '90s, and when he retired, like 7 championships. He was, in my opinion, the greatest to ever play the game. Um, well, they were interviewing Stephen A. Smith, and he's been a sports commentator for the last number of years. And he's actually born in Lumberton, North Carolina, which is not too far from here, which is really weird. And he said, Michael Jordan, no, he said, LeBron James is highly respected across the league. He's won like 2 championships, maybe 3. I don't remember. He's also been on multiple teams. Jordan only played on 2 teams.
Mm-hmm.
LeBron James also had like a top 5 draft pick, at least playing alongside him the majority of the time, and Jordan didn't, like, ever.
Mm-hmm.
And so if you just look at it from the stats, Michael Jordan has more rings. LeBron James doesn't. I think that's pretty easy to determine. However, this commentator said LeBron James is respected. He said Michael Jordan is feared. And I was like, ooh, I like the idea of being feared because I'm really competitive. I'm so competitive that when I was watching The Last Dance, which is the documentary on Michael Jordan, I could sit there and I could listen to him talk, and I'm thinking to myself, man, I think like he does. I am not Michael Jordan by any means. I do not have a skill set that is excellent. That is not what I'm saying here, but my competitive nature is the same. So he tells this story of how him and Steve Kerr, one of his teammates, who was not on his level,
Mm-hmm.
but Michael Jordan had the expectation for him to be on his level because if he passed the ball to Steve Kerr and he shot the ball and he missed, that means they were going to lose. And there was no losing with Michael Jordan. And I was like, wow, that's exactly how I feel. And so I really like to control outcomes. One of the things about coaching is I can't control the outcome,
Mm-hmm.
right? I have to rely on my clients to do what I tell them to do, and that's going to bring us to the outcome. It is the epitome of being a selfless teammate that guides someone through a process. I can't take the ball and take the winning shot. However, that's my nature. That's what I would rather do. And I've always worked this hard and I've always been this competitive because when I was little, you know, when you're getting picked for kickball and there's like 2 people, the team leaders, and they're picking, okay, you next. And I always got picked last.
Mm-hmm. Me too.
Always got picked last.
Yeah.
and then that translates to my personal life. I've always been picked last. I've always kind of been the underdog.
Mm-hmm.
You know, even in my coaching, like I think this year is going to be a little different. I think me and Ryan Farid are going to fuck some people up on stage, but there's some situations where coming into a scenario, you know, in a competitive scenario, I've been the underdog. I've won sometimes and I've lost sometimes, but I just don't typically get the respect that I feel like maybe I should get
Mm-hmm.
based on the type of coach that I am. So anyway, I finally get to the realization that my expectations are high for myself because I never have been picked first. And I strive to be a person that someone would want to pick first.
Mm-hmm.
So then I take that expectation and I apply it across the board, except for the people that are closest to me. So, like even Laura. Laura is one of my closest friends. I probably have more grace for Laura than I do even myself or anyone else in my life because I know her well and I know where she probably struggles and I accept those struggles and it's fine. Like all that's fine for me. But the further you are from my inner circle, the higher my expectations are for you. And with all that being said, it has me reevaluating um, how I look at other people and boundaries, and also just it's made me realize like where I'm lacking as a person
Mm,
in my own self awareness. I mean, I've been this way for fucking 40 years.
right.
Like, I was watching Michael Jordan like when I was in fucking high school, middle school, stuff like that. And like the trauma of not getting picked first happened in middle school. Like this is something that has been ingrained in me deeply for a really long time. So for me to just now wake up to the fact that like, oh, I've never been picked first, and oh, I have these expectations that are out of control, and oh, and I apply it to everyone that I fucking know, and like that's a problem because no one's going to meet my expectations. And really, at the root of all of it, and what my therapist and I were talking about is we shouldn't have expectations for anybody
Wait a second, though.
because
Let's
this is
back up. Let's back up before you get to that part.
okay.
I think it's really interesting that you brought up the fact that this is something that has been kind of a theme for you since middle school, but it's not
Right,
something that you've ever explored intentionally, right? It's just been that
right,
thing that's been running in the back of your brain, and it's been running as, kind of like, um, like the cars that we drive, we get in, we drive, we go, it gets us somewhere, right? It serves a purpose for us. That
right.
has been running in the back of your brain because it served a purpose for you, and it was an unconscious, subconscious thing that was happening, that was actually something that was moving your life in a variety of directions and moving your thoughts and your choices in a variety of directions without your knowledge, right? And so that is really interesting because, number one, that leads into, I mean, that's why we're having this conversation, is because self-awareness is so important, to be able to figure out what that thing is, or those things are, that are making you make the choices, right? And most of those
Right.
things do come from when we were in middle school. Is a real tough time, man. So most of the time those things come from either in middle school with friends or our family of origin or something like that, and we've just continued to use them because we've never addressed them until, like, the biggest key to self-awareness is when you notice a strong negative reaction to something like you did, you stop and you go, wait a minute, this is something that I should pay attention to. And for you, you got to go to a counselor and have the conversation.
Yeah, but I will say this. I sat in silence and it's funny, my internet went down over the weekend and I could not do check-ins. I could get on my phone, but it was like slow, you know? So I had to sit there with my dogs and I had to address what was going on in my head. And I do that kind of anyway, like sort of in general. I'm sort of an introspective person. So like that's kind of a normal thing. However, um, I didn't have any distractions at all.
Mm,
So, and I also had some conversations with people that dug some shit up,
hmm
right? And so, like, when you're having conversations that are deep, maybe with people that understand you or that are, maybe they're getting to know you on a deeper level and they ask those like questions that are like unpacking certain things,
mm,
then all of a sudden you take that information and you start to digest it in the back of your head.
yeah.
And so, like, here I am, I'm kind of throughout the whole weekend, I probably was just processing all this stuff subconsciously. And by the time I walked into my counselor's office and I sit down in front of her, I'm probably three-quarters of the way there.
Right.
And then she's wise enough as a professional to be like, oh, let me direct this conversation so that maybe it opens Pandora's box a bit. And I sat there, I shit you not, when I figured out that I was projecting my expectations on other people, I sat there like dumbfounded. I literally looked at her and I was like, how the hell did we get here? And she's like, I don't actually know. And I'm like, I just sat there and I literally was like, well, I'm the fucking problem. And she said, yeah, we should probably put that in a more like positive light.
Mm-hmm.
But the root is you are creating your own problems.
Right.
Yes.
Yes.
And that's where like the light bulb went off and I'm talking to you on the phone and I'm like, how often do we see clients? How often do we see other coaches? How often do we see friends of ours that like maybe they're under this rain cloud or maybe they're in the middle of a situation and you're just like, Nancy, really? Can you just see where you are? I see where you are. We
Yes.
can't see where you are. You like just like wake up to the fact that this is the situation.
Yeah.
And so then we started talking about self-awareness. So anyway,
Though,
yeah, that's
think
kind of how
about
that
that,
happened.
right? That's too, you're saying it took you 40 years, whatever, 30, whatever, because you're only 40, my friend. So give yourself a little credit. But like 30 years to come to this all of a sudden realization, right? Which is never all of a sudden. Because what we know is our brain has been working on it and working on it and working on it like undercover, and we just don't pay attention because one of the keys that we're going to talk about, ways to cultivate self-awareness, is we don't take a lot of time to sit and be with ourselves and not be distracted. And you brought that up, right? Also, though, it does take time to get through that and to figure that out. And having someone, like you said, which is cultivation tip number 2, having people to talk to about it was important. That helped to kind of bring it out more. But then when we talk about coaching and self-awareness with coaching and the fact that we're like, hey, Nancy, like I am here as a third party objective person, as your coach, you're paying me to do this job. You got to tell me the stuff because I can see stuff that maybe you can't. And it's not because I'm better than you. It has nothing to do with that. It's because I'm not you, right? It's because
Yeah.
I'm not you. And so that is huge when we think about working with a coach. When we think about, because that coach is going to take the 30 years and hopefully it'll only take, whatever, however time, right? If we're going to work on it for a year, right? We're hoping that coaches can help like make it happen faster for us, right? However,
Yeah.
you said this too, you have to be open to it, right? Like I've had
A
clients.
lot of people aren't.
No, and just recently, I had to let a client go because I was putting more work into her transformation and her journey than she was, because I was always thinking about, like, I was very aware of what she needed, where she was, what's going on. Admittedly, she wasn't necessarily telling me everything on her own, but there were things that I could extrapolate from the information I got. And it got to that point where it's like, you're not allowing me to help you, right? And you're not allowing me to expedite this process for you. And that's what we do as coaches. We expedite that process. That could take someone 40 years or 50 years, or they would never get there if it wasn't for us.
Well, it's that. So I had another conversation on piggybacking after this counseling session with a lady who's in the 50-year-old demographic. And, I find that like various clients, they fall into like, there's some typical things that you can run across. One of the typical things that I see in the 50-year-old demographic with females is you've had 30, 40 years worth of, indoctrination of, certain fitness, misinformation. I like that word in that particular situation.
Misinformation.
It's like, right.
It's a real nice way of saying that.
So it's, you're learning things from other people that maybe don't know the truth, or you have life experiences maybe with your mother, with your father, stuff like that, and they move through life and they think they're doing the right things, but it's actually just sort of torturous and miserable. And then they wake up, 30 years in, 40 years in to doing what they thought they were supposed to do. And they realize, well, I did it all wrong. And how do I re-engineer my life to be the person that I want to be? Well, that takes all hands on deck. And it's not, and I'm not talking about like me and Laura as coaches. It's you as an individual, as a client, you have to literally pull the e-brake and say, okay, all the things stop today.
Mm-hmm.
All the, I I become first priority, because that's the other thing about that demographic is like the majority of those women, they are not putting themselves first.
Mm-hmm.
They're not caring for themselves. It's all of this information that's like, the more I give of myself, the more I do, the more they're not they're not filling their own cup up. They're just pouring it out all the time.
Well, we've
So
been
to
taught, I
undo
mean,
that,
that demographic has been taught that you find your value in what you can give to other people, right?
right. So when you actually start to undo all of that, there's a lot of fear in there. There's a
Oh,
lot of fear of like, man, I can't face what I've done, or I can't face what I haven't done. I don't want to face the potential changes. I don't want to face a lifestyle change, whatever, or tough
well,
conversations,
and
stuff like that.
the fear too is that you start changing yourself and what everyone's expectations of you and how you interact with them have to change. And one of the base fears is if I don't continue to do all the things for everyone, they will leave.
Right,
Or
right.
they won't need me anymore. And if I'm not needed, where's my value? Right? You get all that
Hmm.
craziness. Yeah.
Yeah, and so that's where, I mean, I even struggle with that. It's not just 50-year-old ladies,
Right.
like I struggle with that. I know a guy that we were just talking about this the other day who's actually killing it. He's changing his mindset, he's changing his lifestyle, all that stuff too. So there's a lot of applicable stuff, and it's like, are you willing? Are you willing to have a hard conversation with yourself? Because that's what it is. The self awareness part, it's like, are you willing to sit in your stuff, kind of see where you really are, pay attention to what you're not doing and what you're doing, and does it serve you anymore? And it takes a while for certain things to bubble up and to find the root causes of things. But that's why Laura was saying it's an active work. Like
Mm.
I've been, what would you say? I hit like a new rock bottom 6 or 7 months ago. You know,
Yeah.
it's probably like 6 or 7 months ago. And
Yeah.
then I've been on this fucking uphill swing,
Yeah.
but it's been this really gradual, sort of like miserable thing that you've had to be a part of the entire time and check
You
in
know
on me
what
the
though?
entire time.
It's so let's do the comparison, right? And this is what I talked to you about before, right? I've said this to you. It's like a weight loss journey. What you wanted to
Yes.
see was rock bottom all the way up. Like I am making that straight line for those of you who can't see me with my hand, going up at that vertical, like that 45-degree angle. Everything improves always. But it's never like that. There's always ups and downs.
No.
It's a very gradual, and most of the time it feels like I took 2 steps forward and 5 steps back, when in fact you really didn't, right? But it feels that way. It feels that way.
Well, it's like a client I have, she dropped like 6 pounds, and then she had a cheat meal, and then she gained 6 pounds back, and it hasn't dropped back yet.
Yeah.
And she thinks she's gained all this fat like in literally in a 24-hour time frame.
Hmm.
And it's like, okay, well, if the scale is the only thing that we're going to look at, then sure, could be true. But I also see your pictures. It's not true,
Hmm.
right? There's so many different variables that go into weight loss, but it's also at the end of the day, it's the squiggly line.
Hmm.
It's like it's getting knocked down, get back up, get knocked down, get back up, and then sometimes you get really high, then you get knocked back down. But it's that progression, is it moving in that 45-degree angle in general,
Right.
and I think that's the goal. But I think you have two choices. When you get knocked down, you can either decide to dig into it as to why you got knocked down, what your role was in it
Mm-hmm.
and determine whether you're going to go back to that rock bottom area or stay in it, sit in it, or change it.
Mm-hmm.
And those are the two those are the two things you can do. And I think the majority of our society is saying, I'm just going to sit in it. It's too hard. It's too hard to climb out of the hole.
Yeah.
And
And
what I
and
would say is it's not.
well, and that comes right back to our conversation, right? Of self-awareness is
Mm.
when you're in that hole and you want to get out and you're like, I want to get out, you need to get a little bit self-aware. You need to connect back with yourself because you're not getting out of there being on social media or watching YouTube all the time. I mean, you're not, or distracting yourself with whatever it happens to be. That's not going to get you out of that hole. It might feel like it does for a minute, right? But ultimately, it's not going to get you out of there.
It's interesting too. I was listening to Jocko Willing on a podcast, and I like him, but it was a different dynamic this time because he was like really matter of fact with the interviewer, and he's usually not like that. He's just a little bit more personable. But the guy was like, "Do you think motivation's fake?" He was like, "Yeah." He just kind of paused. He's like, "Why?" And he was like, "Well, you know what you need to do.
Mm-hmm.
It's not that you don't know what you need to do.
Mm-hmm.
It's just you need to go fucking do it."
Yeah, you're choosing not to.
And if you go do it, that's going to motivate you.
Mm-hmm.
And so like I know like hitting rock bottom 6 7 months ago in my personal life, I knew what I needed to do. It's just I didn't want to do it.
Mm-hmm. So that is a
But
great place to talk about our 6 things, right? So we talked about how do we, when we're in that space, or not even so much in that space, maybe we're not at rock bottom, but we just need, we're working with a coach, clients out there working with a coach, or even a coach working with your mentor,
it's,
or right? It applies to all of
I
us.
think it's a rock bottom in some like I think it's rock bottom.
Mm,
It's like different levels of rock bottom because you have you have a personal life where like rock bottom could be like really really low, like you're on cocaine or something and can't get off of it kind of deal. That didn't happen.
no.
But you know what I'm saying? But like it
Mm,
could be a rock bottom with your health journey. Like you're fucking fed up with the fact that you're 300 pounds, whatever that is. Like there's different levels of rock bottom. And I think you just have to get sick and tired of like where you're at. And do you want to move forward or not? And if you want to move forward, you have to understand what got you there
mm.
and what's going to propel you out of it.
So
Do you think that's right?
yes. So ways
Okay.
to cultivate that understanding of what got you there, right? Ways
Mm-hmm.
to reconnect with yourself. Because, like we were talking about, it's so much easier, well, in the moment to not do the work and to just sit in it, right? I'm not doing
Mm-hmm.
anything. I'm just going to sit here. So, ways to cultivate that connection to self. We talked about the first one. You talked about time to reflect with your story. You said you sat, you thought about it. I mean, you did some real conscious cognitive work around it. You had active thoughts around what was bothering you, right? That's time to reflect. Super important. Second thing that you said was that you talk to friends. You talk to people who kind of know the situation or know you really well, people that you trusted. You had a conversation with them in a variety of ways.
I think trust is the big thing. If you actually have, if you trust somebody implicitly and you can be vulnerable with that person, that's a different thing.
Mhm.
You don't want to talk to hell, it may not even be your coach that you can talk to,
Mhm.
or it's got to be somebody that you can trust with your innermost thoughts. That's what it is.
Right,
Like that, at least that's what it is for me.
right. Good point, for sure. Absolutely. Um, so time to reflect for yourself. Talk to trusted people in your life, whomever that might be. Um, Another way is, well, and this kind of goes hand in hand with that time to reflect is that mindfulness piece, being present, being mindful. right? And it sounds like
I actually have a story about that.
go
Just
for
a
it.
real quick one.
Yeah.
So the other day, I I had not eaten breakfast,
Hmm.
and sometimes when I don't eat breakfast, I can let the day can get slipped away a little bit, and then I don't usually eat till later. I try not to let that happen too much. But I was talking to a friend of mine. It wasn't you, but I was talking to a friend of mine. But this can apply to you. This let's just say this is Laura, because if Laura's hangry, it can things can get
Laura
derailed pretty quick.
never gets hangry. For those of you who are not watching us on YouTube, total sarcasm all over my face.
so I was hungry, and but I could not manage my emotion. I couldn't regulate my emotions because I was hungry.
Mm.
And I didn't really realize that I was hungry because I was emotional.
Mm.
But I was actually projecting on the other person. She was basically saying, "Hey, you need to eat. You need to eat. You need to eat." And I was like, "Hey, don't be don't be so angry at me. You need to go eat." Like I was projecting it on her, saying that she needed to eat the food. And really, in all reality, she was just right
Right.
the whole time. I was hungry and I wasn't being self aware at the time. And I wasn't being mindful of the fact that I had not eaten, which had now put me in this position to where I was acting irrationally, emotionally. And then I had once I got food, I had to circle back around with that person and be like, "Hey, so that Snickers bar commercial, that's exactly what happens with me.
Right.
That's exactly what happens with me. I'm so sorry."
Right.
So mindfulness, I think, is like actually understanding when you're coming off the rails.
Right. Yes. And two, to that point, then, because that was what, one, two, three. The fourth piece then is like when you are being mindful, what does that look like? It can be meditation. Now, I just heard like 50% of our audience's brains shut off and like screech to a stop. Like meditation, people hear that word and they're like, ah, nope, nope. Because people get this picture that you have to wear the fun robes and burn the incense and have really long hair and, don't shave your armpits and sit in it, and om and do that. No, that's not meditation. Meditation is literally just coming back to your breath and being still. That's it. And I tell this to my clients all the time. It's like, take 3 really deep belly breaths, right? Because if we breathe into our shoulders, and I'm raising my shoulders when I breathe, that's what we do when we're stressed out. We breathe into our lungs when we're stressed out to bring us back into that space where we can calm down and really be mindful and really reconnect with ourselves. We have to breathe into our belly. What does that look like? That means you sit down and you inhale, and as you inhale, your belly expands and then it contracts, and that brings you into that calm space. That is as simple as meditation can be, and that is the fastest way to bring yourself back into connection and self-awareness of your body and who you are. Simple.
Yep.
Just breathe, man. Just deep breaths. um
Right.
if you wanted to add to that, right, the fifth, I think it's the fifth piece, if you wanted to add to that, you could add movement to that, which we call yoga, because we in the Western world added movement to a yoga practice, because in the Eastern cultures, the breathing was the most important part. And if you have ever done yoga, and thankfully I am actually an instructor, haven't done it for a while, but breathing is the most important part of yoga. The postures are really great. And, some people look fabulous doing them, and some people actually look like the animals when they're doing them, which is not right. But the postures don't matter as much. But what's nice about yoga is that if you choose to do yoga, number one, there's a lot of great resources on YouTube that are free. But you can also go take classes and be with other people, which is kind of nice because you get a different vibe there, and you can get into that presence with yourself, with music, with stillness, with quiet very easily. doing yoga. So, and
Well, here's another question.
Mhm.
So I'm not, the day that I do yoga is the day that like the world's coming to end. That's coming to an end. Like I'm not going to do it.
Oh, there's so many
I'm just
types of
being,
yoga though.
I'm just being honest with you. I'm not going to be a yogi. I'm not going to
Okay,
do it.
so instead
It's
of
not
yoga,
namaste.
you could add like instead of adding yoga as movement with your breathing, you could go for a walk.
That's what I was going to say.
Mhm.
So if you don't want to do yoga and go to a class and see people, because
You
here's
can
the
do it
thing.
at your house.
Hear me out. Hear me out. I don't, I'm just telling you, the day that I start stretching in the middle of my floor by myself, there's something wrong. There's something different that happening with me.
You do it
And I
at the
can't do it.
gym.
I can't, no, this is different.
That-
I'm just telling you, there's a mental block for me in yoga. There's
Okay.
an experience that I don't have to go into. That's why. So
Okay.
we're not doing yoga. However, walking, I really enjoy walking. Guess who got me into walking?
Don't know.
You did.
I did?
Yeah, because you walk every single day while we talk on the phone, and then eventually I got to the place where I'm going to go for my walk.
Mhm.
And so what I realized was if we didn't talk and I'm walking and I don't have anything playing in my ears and I'm walking, it's a silent walk.
Mm,
I'm paying attention to my surroundings because we don't want to get hit by a car.
mm,
However, I'm letting my brain process things. I'm looking from left to right. That looking from left to right is like EMDR therapy, was rapid eye movement therapy,
mhm,
which basically disengages the amygdala, which allows you to release trauma into the prefrontal cortex so you can process it. And that's actually how the therapy started. Was the therapist actually started walking and realized, oh, look, my anxiety, my fear of my own emotions, the ability to process this stuff is easier when I'm walking, looking from left to right. And it's like this, it's not like this really weird, like left to right, left to right, left to right, left to right. It's like you're just casually looking around, right? And it's disengaging that looping pattern in your brain so
mm,
that you can be still with your thoughts.
mhm.
And I think that's the scary thing that people aren't doing. And we touched on that a couple times. But I just would encourage people, if you increase self-awareness, there's some things that are going to happen. If you're working with a coach, your ability to adhere, your ability to improve, and your transformation of wherever you're headed is going to be a lot better. One. Two, every single one of your relationships is going to get better.
Mm,
Three, your ability to communicate is going to get better. Because if you know how you feel on the inside, or if you know what brought you where you are, then you're going to be able to put it into words to tell somebody else how you feel so that that communication is more effective. And I think that's where, as coaches, we get really frustrated. And here comes those expectations. We get really frustrated because, there's a lack of self awareness that's going on, and we are aware. We see you as the person that you are when you type your crazy email, when we're on the phone and your tone of voice is like elevated and you don't even know it. You're like, I'm fine. I don't know. I'm fine. I'm fine. And it's like, you're not fine. Just take a minute and listen to yourself. You
right.
need to be mindful of how you're talking to me right now. Like I literally was just having a conversation before we got on the phone. Like the person's voice was as if she was on the cliff of the precipice of her life talking about cholesterol. And it's like, honey, the cholesterol is within functional range. Functional range. We are fine. Everything is fine. But she just wanted to fall off the freaking cliff. And it's like, no, the rest of your blood work that shows you're stressed the hell out. This is this conversation is confirming the blood work. Thank you.
Right.
Thank you.
Right.
So that's where we really get frustrated. So not only, and it's not because we have to work with you guys, it's because we want better for you. Like that's where it's coming from. We actually want better for you. So just like get more self-aware, folks, please.
But ultimately, and I think that is a great place to kind of end this piece, is it's not, we, our expectations of our clients aren't there because we're mean, nasty, rotten people. um I mean, we have our own work that we do on ourselves, and you've explained a lot of that today. Thank you for sharing. I mean, that's super courageous to share your journey and where you're at and what you're going through. um I have my own journey that I go through, and we've talked about that, and I'm sure we'll continue to talk. Right now I'm just feeling like a big old fat tank over here building muscle. um but we don't, we and I try, and this was part of my conversation with the client that I'm no longer working with, is I want to do my best work for you because I care about you. Like you're saying,
Mhm.
I want you to do better, not because I want you to do better, but because I know you're going to feel better, and I know your life is going to be better. And I want to hear the joy in your voice, and I want to see the joy on your face when we Zoom or whatever it is. Because now I'm your coach and I'm bought in. And I'm bought in because I care about you as a human being, and I want you to be better and feel better and do better and all those things. And when you don't actively participate, or you don't, you're unable to tell the truth, or you're, whatever that is, or you're not self-aware, that's what we have to work on. Because I can do all the things I can do, Coach Kenneth, you can do all the things you can do, but if the client isn't going to participate in that self-awareness and help dig in and peel back those layers, what we do is truly only going to be surface stuff, because we can't get you to the point where it's going to last.
Yeah.
And that's why we do what we do, is because it's not just a job. And I said this to my husband last night. This isn't just a job. This isn't just a job. We're changing lives. I want to change lives. And that affects me when lives are being changed in a good way. And when I'm unable to help someone change their life, that affects me personally.
Yeah. I mean, like, I think every coach that I know that cares on the level that we care struggles with the inability to see people succeed and then absolutely celebrates things when people do. Like I get emotional in both cases.
Mhm.
So like I've already told Ryan Farida, we're getting ready to go into nationals here in about 12 to 13 weeks. If and when he wins his pro card, he's going to see a freaking emotional side of me he's probably never seen before. I'm going to be so freaking happy that I don't know. I might strip down and run down the street streaking. Who knows? I don't know.
That's great.
But but, like, last week have a scenario and, somebody basically doesn't live up to their potential, and that affects me, right? Because I care about them on a deep level. And it's hard not to care about your clients when you're in control of 90% of what they're supposed to do in their day-to-day life.
Yeah.
And so I think, to close it out, I think that's why we're wanting to talk about self-awareness, is because not only is it, important for you just as a general purpose, but it's, for our clients listening, it's going to do nothing but help our relationship.
Mhm.
And it's really the main pandemic that I see. It's not COVID or whatever else is coming over the horizon. We live in a society full of people that are not self-aware of what's happening. And it's not necessarily what's happening around them, but it's what's happening on the inside.
Yeah, for sure. Absolutely. On that note, ladies and gentlemen, check out the show notes. We will have all 6 things listed for you to help you build your own self-awareness or connection to self. And as always, our information will be below if you want to just chat with us, either one of us, because you're wondering about coaching or you have questions about whatever it is. We both do free consultation calls and we'll answer your questions. And if you have questions that you want us to talk about or topics you want us to talk about, make sure you hit us up on Instagram, Facebook, or even in the podcast, right? write us a little comment.
Mhm.
And we will we'll set up some shows that are things that you want to hear about in particular. So everybody have a great rest of your week, and hopefully spring will rain sunshine on us soon, those of us in the northern climes. And I will talk to you soon. Everybody have a